Monday, July 23rd, 2018. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. It is 7 o'clock p.m. We will call the meeting to order. Would all please join in Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes, corrections to the agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes from our July 9th, 2018 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 4 through 8. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor of the minutes as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we will address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 9 and concludes with the resolution on page 26 and includes the following budgeted purchases over $10,000 to metering and technology solutions for 100 water meters for $13,340. Following renewals or temporary licenses: temporary soft drink for El Tacazo Mexican Delights for Minnesota Square Park for July 15th, 2018. Temporary on-sale liquor license to Nicollet County Ag Society for 400 West Union from 8/8/18 to 8/11/18. To Nicollet County Pheasants Forever for 400 Union for August 12th, 2018. St. Peter Baseball Association for 400 Union Street, the grandstand, from August 8th, 18 to August 11th, 2018. The Redmond Club for 412 South 3rd for August 18th, 2018. Temporary gambling license to Gustavus Adolphus for 800 West College for, what is that month, October? October 30th, 2018. The following employee appointments: Joseph Schugel for Director of Recreation and Leisure Services with a starting salary of $71,000, plus the regular schedule of disbursements for July 5th, 2018 through July 18th, 2018. Are there any questions or comments about the consent agenda? Ed, sorry.
Todd, you could probably answer this quickly, but on page 13, Central Square Apartments Limited, what's that 22,000 for?
That would be part of the tax increment financing agreement. And without getting into too much detail, since that is a pay-as-you-go district, when they remit their taxes in the middle of May, the county receives those taxes, they process the taxes, they send information to our finance director, and then we remit them based on a promissory note that is part of the pay-as-you-go TIF. I'd be much better with a whiteboard, but that's what it works for.
That's the short version?
That's a short version,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Now, any more questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Aye.
Mayor Zimmer.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Craig.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. First up tonight, we have unfinished business, and the first thing is, or the only thing is, the Veterans Memorial Park Sidewalk Project. Mr. Moulton.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, we have completed the sidewalk project that was authorized in the summer of 2017. As you're aware, we worked with OMG Midwest, which was formerly CHARD from Belle Plaine, to do the sidewalk. This did take a rejection of the first initial bid. They were the second group to come in and be authorized to do the work. And as you're aware, we did that with several alternates in the project, all of which were completed. This project is unique in the fact that city staff participated with a restoration of the area. As you can tell from the dirt and the sidewalk area there, it's very well received, very busy down there. We did have one increase in cost, and that was from the Chatham Street cul-de-sac to the pool. We upsized that concrete to accommodate the heavier trucks that come in for deliveries. We originally had 4-inch concrete in there. We didn't catch that during the review, and we made that change during the construction, which is the additional cost. Altogether, there was about 3,900 feet of concrete sidewalk that was put in there and walkway, added for this cost. Very good pricing. There's a resolution on page 29 that I'm asking you to authorize, which would close out and final this project. All the paperwork has been submitted and checked off, and we're very satisfied with the project.
Questions? Pete, how much of an area did you say? I'm sorry.
3,900 feet, linear feet.
Lineal, okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? If not, the resolution for the Veterans Memorial Park Sidewalk Project is on page 29. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlson.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. That, we will now go into new business. The first one is the 2017 audit presentation and acceptance.
Mayor and Member Sally is going to come up here, as is Jim Eichten. Jim's going to do the majority of the presentation. Our goal tonight is to make sure that you've had a chance to look at the management report, the financial statements of the city, and the report from Jim and his team. I always like to point out that Jim and MMKR do not work for me. They do not work for Sally. They work for you. That's a very important distinction to make as a part of this. And I'm sure Jim will mention that as well. So, if you guys give me just a moment, or you can talk while I'm making my computer do stuff, that would be great.
So, Mayor and Council, Jim is here to present the audit results. We had a good audit. I am very new to this process, as you all know, so worked very close with Jim, and so did my staff, and I think we came out with a qualified, and I'm happy with the results of the audit for 2017. General fund is sitting at 52.3%. Which is well within the guidelines of what you have recommended in your statutes, and the total general fund is at 51.5%. So Jim will go through his audit report, and we'll ask for approval after he's completed.
Nice. Thanks, Sally. Again, my name is Jim Eichten with MMKR CPAs, here this evening to provide a report on the audit for the year ended December 31st, 2017. If you can click it twice, it'll go past the fading there. Tom.
One more?
If you
No.
click it twice every time, it'll go past the fading. Just
Okay.
a little tip. Thank
Okay.
you. So first of all, the point of me being here is to provide a presentation of the audit report. It's important to understand the role of the auditor. It is a requirement in state statute that the city have an annual financial statement prepared. That annual financial statement is required to be audited by an independent certified public accountant, which is why I'm here. And as part of that, we provide opinions on a variety of items. The first is that financial statement. The second one is your internal controls over specifically related financial reporting items. We also test your controls over the compliance with laws and regulations that relate to that financial reporting. And specifically, it comes down to grants and those types of items that stand out in the compliance area. And then we also audit your compliance with Minnesota statutes. The Office of the State Auditor gives us a list of the statutes that we test. We don't test every law, just those on the list. And then lastly, if the city had more than $750,000 of federal revenue, you're required to have what's called a single audit of federal rewards, which is guided by the federal regulations. This year, the city did exceed that $750,000 threshold, so we did go through that process, and we haven't recently, so it did add some complexity to the audit this year. So in the results of my report, they are mostly outlined within what's called the management report. The management report has identified is really my report to provide a summary of the audit. And really, it's intended to provide required communications, but it's also required to, it's outlined in a sense that you could read the report and get an idea how the audit went without actually me being here. I am required to be here to get acceptance of the report, but it is for the purpose of the management report. So in that report, the audit results were very good this year. First and foremost, we did issue an unmodified opinion on most or all of the components of the city's financial report. Again, this year we did provide a modified opinion on the Fire Relief Association reporting of its pension. So the St. Peter Fire Relief does not follow one particular accounting standard, GASB 68 on pensions. They are allowed to do that based on guidance that is issued by the Office of the State Auditor. So as such, the city isn't able to follow that standard as well because you don't have the information available to you. And again, it is allowed by the Office of the State Auditor to do that, but it is an item that you should be aware of. But overall, you did have a clean opinion on all other areas of your report. We do issue what's called the segregation of duties findings related to internal control. Really, that particular finding relates specifically to the size of your organization versus any sort of improvements that need to be made. We really go into the audit with the understanding that you have a certain size organization. We report that you have a segregation of duties finding, and we look for compensating controls that would allow for appropriate controls in place based on the size of your audit, and really didn't have any items to report on top of that. So I did mention the single audit of federal awards. As mentioned, that particular audit process hasn't happened in a few years. I can immediately tell you when that happens in my audit, I'm going to expect that there's probably going to be a finding or two. City governments typically go in and out of these single audits, and there's a very significant amount of complexity in those. So having findings is pretty common. Even more noteworthy, in 2016, the federal government issued a complete new set of standards called the Uniform Guidance. And the Uniform Guidance added to the complexity of single audits in such that we have found more and more findings the last few years than we ever have traditionally. So in your report, actually, this year, we did have a finding specifically related to that new Uniform Guidance. The new Uniform Guidance, for the first time, requires city governments to have written accounting procedures for very specific areas when it comes to spending of federal awards. And the three that we noted that weren't in place are listed: cash management, allowable costs, and procurement are the ones that stand out to us. The city really hasn't before this time had the requirement to have written procedures. It's certainly a best practice, but something that you weren't required to have. And the federal government is really now requiring that. You really have to write down and have them written from verbatim as to what your procedures are specifically to these federal grants. We have provided the city with some information on that data. The city has issued what I call a corrective action plan related to this particular finding and how you're going to correct it in such that so when we come back next year, the finding would be eliminated. And lastly, we didn't have any findings related to the auditing of your Minnesota legal compliance. I also wanted to follow up, I don't know if it's on the slide, but I will suggest that we did have findings last year, two findings in particular related to the legal compliance that we always are required to follow up on and do additional procedures, if not added procedures in those areas, and did not issue findings in both of those cases. So that's a very positive point of this audit as well. So the second part of any audit is really the financial side of the audit. In my management report, we go through those types of areas as well as discussing a number of other, summarizing the audits. Probably the highlight of that particular item is that there weren't any difficulties in performing the audit. I think Sally prefaced this a little bit, that you did have some changeover in the finance office this particular year after a number of years of having this same individual. I would preface even that statement as to when I hear that and I see that, I usually find that there's going to be challenges. When you have changeovers, you tend to see challenges in audit, and we didn't see that at all. It was a very smooth process, and the audit went very, very well given the circumstance and giving the changeover. So that can be a credit to Sally, but it can be a credit to everybody.
Staff and
Everybody on staff did a great job this year. So I can move to the next one. So one more, please. Yeah, so I mentioned that the second part of the audit relates to the financial results. We tend to look at property taxes when you look at financial results first and foremost. Property taxes tend to start with market values. You can see in my management report, this is a graph that's in there, that market values around the state are increasing. The city of St. Peter's market value increased by about 5% going back to tax year 17, which is actually a valuation as of January 1st of 16. But this particular trend line is being seen all over the state. It's very, very typical of market values. The next graph actually then shows some tax rates. The city's average tax rate for 2017 was 49.1 compared to a city statewide number of 46.5 for the year previous. Before that, it was even closer to the average. That particular average tax rate in total, for the total resident tax rate is actually higher for all reporting entities given the school districts, mostly the referendum that was passed is having an impact on that particular graph. So what that means to the city's revenues is shown on the next graph. Actually, one more, please, thank you. We provide some information on revenues on a per capita basis in the audit. You can see, given the property tax makeup of the city, even though your property tax rate is very similar to other cities statewide, it's generating significantly less property tax revenue on a per capita basis. And that solely has to do with the non-taxable property within the city. Given that equation, the city does rely quite a bit more on intergovernmental revenues. You can see that particular line stands out. You're generating revenues to the tune of almost $350,000 to $400,000 or $400 per resident, where anywhere similar cities across the state are only generating about $150. And again, that has to do with formulas at the state level, has to do with probably with some work on the part of staff to generate additional grants, those kind of things. The next particular graph does show then the spending by the governmental funds. Now, this particular presentation excludes your enterprise funds, your business type funds. In total, the city on a current basis spent about $680 per resident, which compares to a city of your size statewide anywhere between $673 to $650. So you're in the realm in terms of total spending per capita. One item that stands out is the park and recreation area, which tends to stand out specifically because you have more active parks and rec programs, and you have this beautiful community center, which is part of that. So that's one aspect that stands out. The last item I want to point out on that one is debt service. We always have a discussion here about debt service. But in the governmental funds, you'll see that your debt service per resident is about $140 per resident. And that is similar to some of the larger cities in the state, but even the category just below you, or actually that is your category just below, is about $200 per resident. So you're managing your debt in that particular area, the governmental funds, very well, and it's stayed very flat. So the other presentation does get into individual funds. The general fund financial position, as Sally mentioned, increased about $70,000 this particular year. That certainly is very close to the expectations that were put forth by the council in terms of the budget. It ended the year with expenditures as a comparison to your operations, or your fund balance as a percentage of your operations, that's 52.3%, which Sally mentioned. That's slightly above the range in your fund balance policy, which states that fund balance would be 35 to 50% of your operations. I believe that at the end of the year that was planned. Some of that amount in excess of that range is going to be used for capital improvements, and that was all planned out as part of the city council's planning procedures, and I'm sure as you continue forth, you'll continue to use that percentage as a tool to make decisions. So moving forward then, I'm going to have you continue to the next one. We also provide individual information on revenues and expenditures. The expenditures in the general fund were less than budget by about $240,000. What stood out to me that almost every category was less than budget, and really nothing major stood out. This particular presentation shows some trends in spending. I bring this forth because this particular graph looks identical to almost every city around the state. You see very flat expenditures on a trend basis in a variety of categories. And then you look at public safety, and it's going up all over our state. There's a variety of reasons that would be taking place. Part of the reason is the need for public safety. So that would be one, but also the cost of that particular category is increasing, both from the wage standpoint, but the health insurance standpoint, which you're experiencing as well. We also provide a variety of presentation on the next one, one more. On your enterprise funds. Remember, the city has a number of enterprise funds. Probably the most significant aspect of the operation in a lot of cases are these enterprise funds. We start with the electric fund. I like to focus on the green line. The green line is income before operating transfers. You can see for the 5 years presented, that particular fund had operating income above zero, in this case significantly more in almost all years. You see a slight decline in 2017. Some of the costs in this particular fund are increasing. In particular, the cost of purchased power has been increasing most notably. In the next graph, we do provide information on the water fund. You can see that the water fund operation has improved dramatically over the presentation here. The green line stands out again. Some of the negative years are going away based on the green line in the data there, and they're increasing significantly. But the water operation continues to have a deficit in terms of its working capital, so it is continuing to work out of some of the past deficits through some transfers. The next graph, I think we show the environmental service fund. This fund is quite a bit smaller in operation. At the end of the last 2 years, you're seeing some deficits in the green line, but smaller in terms of size, and overall this fund does have positive working capital, even though we've seen some deficits there. The next graph is the wastewater fund. Again, the green line is seeing some very positive trend lines there, and you can see some very positive improvements in the wastewater fund. Not sure how many other of these I presented. Stormwater fund, again, it has some small deficits, but it continues to have a very significant working capital component. The last item, I guess, in my presentation then goes into providing information on outstanding debt. We've provided this information the last several years as an additional tool to the audit. If you go to this particular presentation shows the amount of debt on a per capita basis, the overall categories of each individual debt that you have comparative to the number of residents you have, and then comparing that to the statewide information. So, for instance, in 2016, the governmental funds had $975 per resident of debt, whereas statewide that averaged out to be about $1,700 per resident. So for the governmental funds, you're seeing quite a bit lower than average debt. That certainly was reflected on the earlier presentation where I said you had less debt service than average. So when you go to the next graph, you'll see that the enterprise funds are the opposite of that. The enterprise fund activity within, next one if you could, Todd.
Yeah, for some reason it does not show
It
here,
doesn't
Jim.
show up.
I don't know why it does not.
Is it not there at all?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Maybe I didn't want to show it after all. No. I can give you just the numbers. If you look at your management report, the the average debt per capita is about $2,700 per resident, whereas in statewide, the enterprise funds are about $844. So you have quite a bit more debt within the enterprise funds. We tend to focus at least, not so much on the totals, but some of the operational pieces, which I showed earlier. But overall, certainly that is a factor that the staff and the administration has always been aware of, the outstanding debt per capita, and continues to do long-range projections to forecast that out and make sure that city has adequate resources, which I believe they do.
Let me see if I
So-
can make it go now, Jim, I'm trying here.
Technological
Yeah.
details.
Details.
There it is.
There we go.
He's an IT guy and a city administrator. So you can see the number I was pointing out there on the enterprise funds. It's about $2,730 per resident in 16, and that compares to $844 for other funds collectively around the state. You'll see that in this graph, it does show an increase in overall debt, and that has to do with a guaranteed energy savings program that you have with a local vendor, or maybe it's not a local vendor, Amoresco?
Amoresco.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that one, actually, again, you're probably having savings, you're adding debt to provide savings. So you do have to look at each individual point when you look at these funds to see how they're doing. So I think that's the end of my presentation. There we go. So I do want to point out that the management report also provides a lot of other items, such as legislative activity. We provide information on future accounting standards, which are forthcoming, which we've talked about with Todd and the administration and Sally. So in summary, I did issue a clean opinion on the basic financial statements. We had the one qualification due to the fire relief, which I pointed out, not implementing GASB 68. We had the one finding in the single audit of federal awards related to written accounting procedures, which the city has issued a corrective action plan that they're working towards achieving. We do find that the financial results do adhere to the budget that was prepared. I think the general fund was in excess of that budget by $68,000, given the size of that fund. That's very, very close to expectations. And lastly, I want to say that as part of the audit, we always ask for certain projections, certain information, a lot of information, frankly, and it was provided to us very quickly and efficiently and effectively, and we're always able to get the answers that we need quickly. And again, without Paula being here, that wasn't my expectation, and the audit went very smooth given that information. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you have
Questions?
for us. Maybe Sally doesn't want to take questions, but I will.
No.
I guess I have, I'm not sure if I can answer this or not, but we can figure it out. The $156 per capita for the debt service, back a couple things, you don't really have to look it up.
Okay.
But under the general obligation bond, so if we get rid of the hospital general obligation bonds, how would that affect, or does that just shift to a different category on that list?
My understanding of Jim's chart is that this chart reflects those funds that are paid from ad valorem taxes. The hospital
Okay.
is not, it comes from enterprise funds, so although it's a general obligation bond, it is not paid by
So that's
taxes, it's
not-
paid by revenues from the hospital.
Yeah.
So it's not included in this
not even
chart,
in
it'd be
that.
under enterprise.
All right.
And some of the hospital none of my charts include any of the hospital.
Right, right, I understand that, I was just kind of wondering how that tied in with the general obligation bonds
Yeah,
that were on.
great question.
Okay. Any other questions?
Before you go forward,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank the Finance Department team and
Yeah.
all the teams do a lot of work related to this, tracking down information, being ready for that, and I really appreciate your auditor's comments relative to the smoothness of the audit. You had a personnel change exactly when the audit was going on, and so that really represents your team very well. I also want to mention that copies of these reports will be available in the library in the next couple of days. So you can just ask one of the clerks for that, and they'll go into Doug and they can get it. And within a week or so, they'll be online, just as your past years have been. So all of these tables and charts and everything else that Jim has shown here today will be available online, as well as the big book that looks like this. The management report and tables and charts is much smaller, and it's mostly what Jim showed tonight, but all of these will be available online for anyone to see. So you can certainly take a look. It takes about a week and a half for us to get them online.
Any other comments, questions? I'd like to reiterate, very good Sally and Paula and Jim, for the work.
Great job.
If there are no other questions, the resolution accepting the 2017 financial statements together with the independent auditor's report appears on page 32. Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
Second.
Any other questions or comments now? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carla.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Klein.
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Next up, we have a request for city assistance for Rock Bend Folk Festival. Todd?
Mayor and members, the information is included in your packet, starting on page
33.
33. And give me just a second to catch up here.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. For some reason, it's acting a little bit wonky. Let's see here. All right, so included in your packet is request information. This is very similar to what you've seen in previous years from the Rock Bend Folk Festival folks. We expect that our assistance costs with time and materials and other things that go on about $7,500. They're required to put forth an appropriate level of insurance, and their timeline is September 4th through the 10th. That gives them a little bit of extra time. Those are not the dates of the event, although they fall in that window. But it takes them a couple days to get set up and takes them about a day to get taken down. Installation of the tent, they gotta make sure they're calling Gopher State One call. They use the gate key. We have and will continue to talk with them again, especially this year, related to the number of vehicles that are in the park. Access to the public works area. Some of their materials are kept within a garage that the Chamber and Rock Bend, Chamber owns, but Rock Bend shares with them, and puts some of their stage and other activities. And it also provides us approval to continue to be the fiscal agent for the grant application. The one that they primarily receive through Prairie Lakes Arts Council is the one that we assist them with. I wish there was something more remarkable to talk about. It's pretty standard fare for a wonderful event that occurs in the park. I don't remember what year it is.
Number 28.
There you go, number 28. So that's fantastic. Again, that information is included on page 35 and 36 with the resolution on page 37.
Questions? If not, the resolution authorizing city assistance for Rock Bend Folk Festival appears on pages 37 and 38. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Suzie, second. Any questions now? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Carla.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Klein.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye. Resolution passes. Next up, we have another request for city assistance. This is for the Nicollet County Fair.
Mayor and members, this is from the Fair Board, and they're looking to use the city water truck that they've utilized in the past. They want us to provide them some picnic tables, which we have provided in the past. Pete and his crew get them out there. And mosquito control, just as a point of clarification, we typically do that mosquito control the morning of the first day of the fair. It's a contact spray, works out really well, it's safe, and we use it in other parks and facilities, and they like us to do it. And so they've requested that. They're required to provide some personnel to run that city water truck. That's one of the big requirements that we have for them going forward. The resolution providing authority for all those things to occur is on page 41.
Questions? Steve?
On page 41, it said, prior to the event, Rock Bend Folk Festival shall provide the city with a certificate.
Cut and paste error on our part,
Okay.
Steve. Thank you very much for noticing that.
I just wanted to beat Mr. Kavami and jump in.
I appreciate that. we will make that change, assuming you approve the resolution.
Ed?
How come we're asking for an employee to volunteer to run the truck?
I think technically, Ed, we ask them to barter in some way to do that. I don't want to pay overtime for somebody to run the truck for their events. They're getting to use your truck for free. They can provide somebody that's certified by the city, that's a city employee. They have a number of them that are on the fair board and volunteers for the fair that could do that work.
I'd never seen that we asked for volunteers before.
Yeah, I'm being more specific this time, because there have been a couple of years in the past where frankly, we paid overtime for that, and I'd prefer to avoid that for the fair. If you would want us to pay overtime and engage the people to do that, I'm more than happy to do that. But they do have people that volunteer for the fair and are on the board that certainly are certified, run the truck, and are also city employees that can do it.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah.
Any other questions? The resolution with the one change on point 2, from changing it from the event Rock Bend Folk Festival to Nicollet County Fair. Authorizing city assistance appears on page 41. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved?
Second.
More questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwame.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Resolution passes. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports, and Todd, the ones that I were going to talk about, you have on your list, so I'll interject if I feel the need, but I'll let you go ahead.
I'll try and be as thorough as I can. I
Thank
do
you.
want to mention the Ride Across America event that was here in Gorman Park
Right
a
across.
Sunday ago.
I'm going to interject right away. I did this when I was down there. It's right across Minnesota.
Oh, I'm sorry, right
I did
across
the same
Minnesota. Right across Minnesota. So last Sunday and through Friday, we've heard a number of very, very positive comments. We've only had a few kind of little bumps that came up that we can correct in the future. I think that group did appreciate the opportunity to have access to the community center over the time of the event. That was valuable, and I think a nice event within the community, and certainly something that spotlights some of the activities that are going on here and makes you look good to a lot of folks from a lot of different places, so it's always fun to do. Next one that I have is campaign sign rules. 'Tis the season, campaigning is starting, and so we just want to mention to folks as they're out in the election process, campaign signs, there's kind of 2, maybe 3 rules of thumb that I'll mention. One of which is that campaign signs, if you're hosting a sign for someone within your yard, generally we'd like you to have it on the house side of the sidewalk. So in the grass and the house side of the sidewalk. If you don't happen to have a sidewalk in front of your house, generally we say about 20 feet back from the curb is a safe distance. So those are the 2. The third item would be, even though you might own a corner lot, you can't have that sign right out in the corner. It's kind of be back. And so think about how traffic is impacted. Can they see around the sign? Generally what we try and do, and the rules within your ordinance specify that you kind of measure 25 feet back from the corner and then draw a line into your yard where those lines intersect, and if you're behind that, you're staying out of view of passing traffic and traffic that's trying to use that intersection. So we'd appreciate that. Oftentimes folks will have a sign in the right spot and they'll pick it up and move it, and then they'll mow and they'll forget to move it back. Stuff like that happens, but we just want folks to be aware of that as they're working to assist candidates in their run for election. Also want to mention the Night to Unite event, which is August 7th. That's coming up from 5:30 to 8 o'clock. That's an event that is sponsored by the St. Peter Recreation Department, the Police Department, and a key sponsor for it this year, providing some additional financing and activities, prizes, those kind of things, is Rivers Edge Hospital. We have lots of folks that participate in that. My recollection is, some of you may recall from last year, is that last year was hotter than a pistol, as I recall. Woo, was it hot. And we still had a fantastic turnout. So there's the smoke chamber for kids to do with the fire department. The fire department has trucks there. There's an ambulance, there's squad cars. There's usually food, there's fun activities, there's a dunk tank always, there's a slip and slide, all kinds of different things.
Readmission at the pool.
Free admission at the pool that night, so it's a great time to be down there and meet with your friends and neighbors and visit with some of the folks that do wonderful things within our community. Want to mention the goal session. Kind of 2 points with this is that that goal session is scheduled for August 6th at 3 o'clock here at the community center in the governor's room, but there will be no workshop next week. So on July 30th, we will not have a workshop. The council talked about what you wanted to do in this instance, and so that's what you decided. I know a couple of you might be on vacation. And so again, the goal setting session is that first Monday, August 6th, starting at 3 o'clock, and we will have no workshop next week. The last item that I have for you is Rock the Block. So this is an event at the Traverse Green neighborhood, really showing off your new park, Prairie Ridge Park there. So if you haven't seen this, we'll make sure to send this out to you. Wonderful event to promote affordable housing within your community. And so it will be at Prairie Ridge Park, which is, the address is 2023 Esler Drive in St. Peter. So there'll be food and music and art activities going on. A lot of groups are participating in this, so that will be a very, very nice event that evening from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock on August 1st. Again, August 1st from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And so if you can attend, that's fantastic. For those that are out there, there'll be tours of homes and all those types of things. So great activity for our community overall as well. I think the last item that, oh, I'm sorry.
Question for you about city events.
Yeah.
There was an event scheduled to be held at the city's dog park, I believe tomorrow night, but I'm not sure if there has been any update regarding weather or regarding water levels at that park. Could you make an update about that? Do you know the update?
I'm sorry, that's not one that I have in my head about the event. It still is wet, but we'll try and figure out something and maybe Facebook tomorrow. Dogs will be
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Ducks, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else know any
I
details?
think that was a Paws was doing that, wasn't it?
I'm not sure. I thought the rec department was engaged in that, but maybe they were in a supporting role.
We'll try and
I'm
get
not
some
sure.
additional information out on Facebook. It's just not one that I have on the top of my head. Susan.
That's
Sorry
okay.
about that.
Sorry.
Pete, were you aware of any?
The last item that I have is the last page on page 42 of your council packet. Mayor members asking for a closed session to discuss the local operating engineers, Local 70 Parks contract. My intent is to come back into session only to adjourn. I do not have documentation or a final of that contract for you. This is to provide you an update on the negotiations related to that contract. And again, I only plan to come back into open session to adjourn.
Before we get into that, is there anything else, anyone else have anything to add or that they'd like to bring up? If not, the resolution calling for a closed session to discuss the local union, where is it here? Parks Union, thank you. The International Order of Operating Engineers, Local Parks Union. Appears on page 42. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Kramer?
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Mayor Zimmern?
Aye.
Councilmember Garland?
Aye.
Councilmember Brennan?
Aye.
Resolution is approved for the closed session. If there's nothing else to add, we will,
We're going to stay here this time, Mr. Mayor?
oh, it says,
Oh, do you have us?
St. Peter Room.
Oh, we do have the St. Peter room?
yeah,
Okay.
that's what it says down here.
Okay, St. Peter room it is.
So we will recess to the St. Peter room, and we will take up the situation or this closed session, and then we will adjourn both of them at the same time down there.
Yep.
Thank you.